And they're learning, despite all of our best
Thank you
efforts
so
to
much.
fix it, so they don't.
Okay.
It's like, oh, kid, let's. And then next year can start to. Give me
All right, good morning, ladies. Got a good group this morning. I'm glad you could all make it. I know it's tough to give up a Saturday, but we appreciate it and think this is really important content. So for those of you who are part of the STAR Teacher Council, we've been talking about this workshop a lot, and this is really a big focal area of what the council is working on this year, this idea of instructional leadership and furthering our own abilities to be mentors in our building. And actually, Teresa's a former STAR teacher. I will say you're still a STAR teacher, but former STAR teacher, council member. So it's nice to have you here too. And so we invited Dr. Bernhardt here to do a workshop on mentoring. He is definitely an expert in the field. I will let him give you his full bio intro, but he is a professor at Metro State, and we connected in the fall around charter schools and trying to engage more student teachers in charter schools and kind of develop some conversations through that. So we're really excited to have him here with us today. We will be spending a full day together. We'll have lunch brought in around 11:45-ish. Other logistical things, restrooms are just out the back door. We're all, adult learners, so feel free to take care of yourself, do what you need. We've got water and snacks and coffee and stuff over there. And if there's anything else you need, just let me know. I will turn it on over.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me. And again, Philip. You can call me Philip. You should call me Philip. It's hot here, so I might take
Feel
this
free.
off.
No worries.
Yeah, I usually end up going sweat in front of you guys. So a couple things. I want to kind of go over to start before we do some brief intros. Just agenda. And I tried when I walked in here. I was like in full teacher mode. I was like, how am I going to make this sort of movable so we can get up a little bit, we can work together. I was just looking, so when we start working together a little bit, I'll move some people if there's not space. It's just so you can make sense of this stuff together. I usually, when I do a lot of these, I'm with groups that all have, they're in common locations, common context, but I found that the ones I do where folks are from all over in different spaces, it's actually more helpful because you bring different perspectives about what might work, how your situation works. Particularly here we have different contexts, which I'll find out in a minute, but we also have K-12, which is always interesting. So usually it's like secondary from this school district or this school, or elementary. So it's nice we have both spread across the Denver metro area, making that exciting, and then also K-12. So perspective is really important. So I got some materials for you. We're going to utilize. Again, we're going to be doing a lot of workshopping today. So do some introductions, kind of give you some takeaways, objectives, kind of where we're going after today. We're going to talk about the significance of mentoring, just to give you some background, show you some interesting Colorado data on what new teachers are saying about their experience not possibly being mentored very well. Look at effective mentoring. We're going to talk about a framework, what those characteristics are. Look at how you can support mentors. We're going to look at instructional mentoring. We're going to look at how you might use your evaluation tools in your particular charter schools or charter school networks to actually support instructional mentoring, coaching. You're going to hear me use mentoring. Probably coaching, though, is, I could use that interchangeably. I just tend to use the word mentoring because of the specific meaning which we'll talk about. And then we'll talk about co-teaching a little bit. How many of you are familiar with co-teaching? Yeah, perfect. So we'll talk about what that might look like, because I do a lot of work around co-teaching with general ed and special ed teachers. But I brought it, there are a lot of people, I shouldn't say but I've started to adopt to think about how you can use that to be a really instructional coach, right? Because we know modeling is super important for effective mentoring. And then we'll talk about setting a plan for you, because it'll all look very different from what I'm strict and Claire, and we can talk about some follow-up if people want to reach out. I can support that piece. So with that said, introductions maybe. We'll go around, and as people were coming in, I was listening, I was writing stuff down. I don't want to have too many things to share about yourself, but grade maybe, school, years teaching, possibly, and then hats, because Jackie was talking about, she was like going through the list of the hats that she wears. I think that's really an important piece, because the thing about mentoring, it takes time, right? So let's do that. So obviously name, I can see that, but grade, school, years teaching, and then the multiple hats you wear. Bethany, you might say?
Sure.
That, yeah.
Bethany Peterly, second grade in Georgetown Community School. This is my 6th year teaching. I've only been, I mean, my hat's pretty much teacher. My principal just kind of, I'm the go-to girl of testing doesn't work, like this week. She put me out to do a whole day of testing. So I really am just a teacher, just kind of the, if someone needs something, they usually come to me.
Got it. That can be a lot of hats. Heather, yeah.
I'm Heather. I teach 4th grade at Rick Wallace Middle Academy. This is my 5th year teaching, and I am a mentor for my there's only one other co-head teacher, so
Okay.
Steve and then book fair coordinator, and starting next year I'll be the senior lead teacher for the
Yeah, important. And so where's your school located?
It's in Denver.
Oh. Okay.
By Regis University.
Okay.
I'm Sarah Graham-Rosa. I teach 3rd through 6th grade special ed at the Academy in Westminster. I've been teaching for 10 years. I'm a special ed coordinator, also somehow the arts guide coordinator.
Somehow.
And I do induction, coordination, and leading, mentoring, coaching.
I've actually been coached by her.
Yeah. Perfect. Wow. That's a lot. That's a busy day. Busy week.
I am an 8th grade teacher at STEM School and Academy in Highlands Ranch. I've been teaching for 13 years. I have a lot of hats this year. I created our cross-curricular program. I'm head of the 8th grade quad. Developed our mentorship. We're a relatively new school over here. Developed our mentorship program. Next year, I'm going to be teaching 2 classes and being focusing on instructional coach. So, let's take out some hats.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm Janelle James. I teach 1st grade. I am a teacher leader. I'm on the data team. That's the first pilot this year at our school. I'm on the MTSS team for special ed. And I'm the teacher leader too for all of the primary, K through 2nd. So PD is important to learn a lot about personal development to give more to the teachers. And English language development, I'm the team lead for that. So I'll give you an induction on ELD. And I've been in education for 10 years, teaching for 6.
That's experience. Great.
Sorry.
It's Saturday. Saturday and early, and I'm thankful you guys are here. Right? Yeah.
I teach 4th and 5th grade at Palmer Montessori. Team lead for upper elementary, and I'm pioneering the blended learning model.
Yeah, right.
Montessori.
That's like a, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Cool. That's interesting. I wonder how parents will respond to that. That's interesting.
I'm Jackie Schmidt. I have been teaching for 11 years. The last 3 years I teach half-time and I instruction coach the other half, some of my hats. I teach high school biological sciences, and then I'm the department chair. I mentor, we're at 612 school, or at least our building is, at Frontier Academy up in Greeley, Colorado. So I have 2 middle school teachers that I directly mentor, and then I instruction coach 612. I do testing coordination. There's tons of stuff, as you guys have all spoken to, I think, in the kinds of schools we teach in, that we end up getting pulled in 1,000 different directions.
Yep.
When you said, and so it'll take off some wet, no, you'll
Oh,
get more hats. You'll get more hats, just different ways. And we were talking about like kind of the struggles of doing that sort of thing, and that we end up not teaching as much or doing the stuff we need to be teaching during the school day. I teach, so we have 8 blocks in a day, or 8 blocks, I guess, technically in 2 days, and I teach 4, so I teach exactly half.
Yeah.
So many directions.
Definitely, and your hats are really important to think about as you go through the day because you know you all seem very immersed at heart in the schools, and you know creating space to do the work that we're going to talk about today and the work that some of you are already doing is probably one of the most challenging pieces, right? It's one of the things that I see missing in a lot of schools, space, unless it's a formalized, you're the coach, right? It's actually a formalized position. Sometimes it gets shrinked out a little bit.
that's how we do all
Yeah.
instruction.
My name is Ashley Eisel. I have been teaching for 10 years, in education for 12. I am a 5th grade teacher of math. We departmentalize at our school 3-8, so we have a math teacher, a science and social studies teacher, and then an ELA teacher. So I am strictly 5th grade math, which is wonderful. I am a team lead, which means I am the lead teacher for the 3 through 5 block.
Okay.
I am a mentor teacher for new to High Point. I teach at High Point Academy over by DIA. So I'm a teacher mentor for new teachers to High Point, and then I'm also a teacher mentor for our induction program as well. So I am directly in charge of 4 people and 90 kids and 270 kids in my hall.
Right.
I'm a mother of 2.
I heard you talking about the ones who don't.
So yeah, so it's and then I'm also on the data and grading and reporting strand because we're trying to go to standards-based grading, and then this coming year we are also going into investigatory learning, dealing with cross-curricular units, and so we're going to be piloting that. So lots of really awesome things that
Yeah.
keep me very, very busy.
Exciting though. Right. Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Yes.
I'm Teresa Brown, and this year I'm a Division III, which is 3rd and 4th grade, teacher for language arts. My class is 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders who all read way above grade level
Okay.
and write kind of all over the map, not so much with the high writing, but we read it. I mean, one of them reads at college level, and he's 10, and brilliant. And then a flat 3rd grade math class, basic 3rd. That's the easy part. And then in addition to that, I do our GT facilitation and teacher trainings and PD outside of school for other schools. And I'm our go-to tech person because I'm available in the afternoon,
Right.
and I got to do discipline. And next year, I'm not going to teach kids, I'm going to teach the grown-ups and be our dean of student support. And so we're going to do this, I call them pseudo-admin
Yep.
because I don't want to actually be admin.
So dean's positions usually are that.
Yes.
You know, back there, all right, I know I'm thinking that I was thinking of how to make it into a circle, but logistically the space did not work. Thank you.
I'm Tina Barrett, and I work at Compass Montessori School, and I'm an upper L teacher for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And I'm getting ready to start a mentoring program at our school.
Okay.
Just really building. I'm the only seasoned teacher on my team, and just really need something formalized. So I'm really excited to be here and learn from all of you.
Super. That's a wonderful to hear.
Yeah. So, and then also one of my other hats I want to share with you earlier is I started the fun committee at my school, which is the committee where it's me and another teacher, and we put together going outs for our teachers, like going to the baseball game or it's a staff committee, fun committee, and make sure birthdays are represented once a month. We do birthday celebrations. So I really enjoy doing that. It's a fun committee.
We have one at Mr. Denver's called in our school band. It's called the Sunshine Committee. It's called the Sunshine. Yeah, they are very nice. Without a doubt. Yeah. Heather.
So I'm Heather. I've been teaching for 8 years. I'm at Lotus School for Excellence. I teach middle and high school ELD. So I'm the department chair for ELD, teacher leader in the building. I sponsor a National Honor Society, coordinate the elementary, the middle school, and the high school levels in that. And we're going to press into higher level of mentoring next year, so this is really good timing.
Yeah, and I think Nikki Jo, she came to something I did 2 years ago. We also had a train wreck with a student teacher at your school that Nikki was working with. Like, it's called a train wreck. I apologize. I was like, oh, I hope she doesn't know the student teacher. It was total like a nightmare. It was all professionally. I'm a student, but yeah. So tell her I apologize. She sent me an email a couple weeks ago, and I felt terrible. So, anyways, well, welcome, and you guys all defy the statistics nationally. It's really interesting, and in Colorado around teaching experience, right? I think everybody is 4 or 5 plus. I think if I heard that correctly, right? We have some folks who've been doing it for a lot longer, right? So that's very nice. And I think that's one of the pieces that's really important is that sometimes we turn over coaching or instructional support to like the person who's been there for a second year who comes in for the new teacher, right? It tends to not. That was my experience when I was a teacher. It didn't work so well. So just a little about me. Yeah, like I sort of had some more doubt. This person that's so disorganized was supposed to be my mentor. So just to give you some background on who I am. So I spent about 10 years as a municipal high school teacher in the Washington, D.C. area. While I was a teacher, I was a cooperating teacher. I would like open my door to student teachers. I wanted to have it. My philosophy was the more the better, right? And then also new teachers. I was sort of supporting them coming into our social studies department. But then I became a university supervisor, so I was working at a university, and I was going out and supporting student teachers, right, and trying to help them integrate themselves a little more. What I found was I was working with a lot with the mentor teacher, the cooperating teacher, on how to mentor the student teacher. That was a lot of the work that I ended up doing, was trying to create that relationship, which is the same relationship that you essentially are going to be working on. Now I run our secondary ed programs at MSU Denver, and I teach teachers, I guess, in middle and high school. I started as an elementary school teacher, though, surprisingly. I was a fifth grade teacher, and I quickly realized that fifth graders don't get sarcasm really well. Right? They just blank stare. It's funny.
It's a journey.
Yeah,
High school, we're good with
I have a
that.
3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and my daughter, I've taught her sarcasm, like through examples. She's like, Dad, that was sarcasm, right? You know, there's no way to really explain sarcasm to a young mind except for just examples, right? So, but yeah, anyway, but I do a lot of work, as Claire said, I do a lot of work on mentoring, induction, supporting the relationship between mentee and mentor, whether it's at our university, whether it's in professional development. But it's sort of a passion of mine because I think, as you might hear come out today, when I was a brand new teacher in 1999, I came into a school and I had nothing, no support at all. My student teaching was really problematic, so that's kind of drives my work at the university. But as a new teacher, I just was left kind of to hang. And our district, really great district outside DC, had what people suggest, really well-renowned induction program. It was very administrative. It wasn't much on the nurturing and rearing and instructional mentoring. So you'll hear some of those experiences come through, but again, today should be about, I think for us, about working together. We're going to get up and move a little bit, not too much. But again, I can't help but have the teacher hat on a little bit in that respect. So today, 3 basic things that we're going to hope you come out with as far as takeaways, right? Is having an understanding of effective mentoring. A deeper understanding for some of you, and maybe a more introductory understanding for others, right? Some of you have been doing this work, and maybe you'll be able to sort of add to this and take some new ideas with you. We're going to think a lot about context, about your context, about schooling in general, and we're going to do some learning scenarios where we're going to actually look through some of these and kind of how do you handle these as a mentor, right? To actually put some of them in practice. And then we're going to start, as we go through the day, right, all the things we're doing, compile into a plan of action, because ultimately at the end of the day, when you leave here, it's like, I'm going to go back to my school and do what, right? I know that some of you have to talk to your administrators and say, hey, look, we need to do this a little better. Or some of you already have, for a bunch, like Tina, to start a mentoring program, right? Now, what is that going to look like? What are the components you might have taken from here that are most important? But I will say it's like anything, there's a lot. I'm going to give you a lot, but not on purpose to overwhelm you, but to give you kind of choices and different ways of thinking about it, because baby steps are really important in anything. So I'm going to try to give you a lot of takeaways, a lot of practical takeaways that you can take and go, I love that idea. I'm going to do that, and specifically how to do that right. And so everything today, as I'll say, is all best practice, and it's all focused on takeaways, stuff that you can roll out here with. So we're not going to focus much on theory, really practice, and I would encourage you to working with your teachers, practice, like things that you implement. Your teachers love that, right? I work with teachers all the time, and some of them are like, just give me a strategy, teaching social, just give me strategies, and finding a way to really outline the most effective strategies. So we're going to get up, though, and I wasn't prepared for the columns, so we're going to do a little formative assessment to get me to figure out just where you're at, because it sounds like you got a huge space. So I don't like laundry, that's why I do this. My wife thinks it's funny, I hate it. But I want to ask 3 questions to kind of get you guys up, and I'm going to try to situate this space-wise. It's tricky. So in the back, so if you were asked to explain what effective mentoring is and is not, right, if you think that you would drown, there's no possible way to do it, I'm going to have you go to the back. If you think that like you understand the basics of effective mentoring, I'm going to have you go right behind where Sarah is, kind of behind there. If you think you're pretty confident in doing that, explaining or contrasting them, then you come over here. And if you think like this is, you know this well, and you're going to be able to sort of help lead today and provide insights, come up here, right? So you might drown behind Sarah. I understand the basics. I'm confident, and then I certainly can do it. I can cheer, so I can do it. So some bold folks over here who are confident, right? Oh, so no one's drowning. Oh, well. So mostly over in the basics. Perfect. That's good. And you guys feel pretty confident because both in coaching roles now.
I feel like I could go in between.
Okay. So but you're that's good. No, I think that's
right now.
no, it's perfect.
And I partly didn't want to stand over there because then I thought you would ask me and I'd have to explain it.
I'm going to ask you anyway. That was actually the plan, right? No, perfect. That's good. That's helpful, right? You know what's helpful is to know that you guys are in coaching roles. Because sometimes folks are put in those roles and they really might not be given the resources. I find that very consistently as someone pops into this role, and whether it's a charter school, whether it's not a charter school, it's the same. They aren't always given the resources and support. So next one, same thing. I might drown. I'm gaining the basics. I'm really confident. If I were asked to model effective mentoring, where would you be on the spectrum, right? You're cheering because you are so confident you can model it. You're here because you have a little confidence, you have the basics, and over here you have no idea how you might model that. Maybe I'm still there. Are you guys doing what your kids do?
I'm seeing what you were talking, so you just
No, perfect. So where would you be? Where would you be? That's honestly, I like that, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Where would you be on this if you were asked to model effective mentoring for others? How would you feel? So we talked about, could you explain it? Now could you actually model it? Like, do you feel like you might drown? Do you feel like you're confident? Do you understand the basics? Do you feel like you're confident? Right. So you know what it looks like, right? So this is like the knowing what it's look like. Explaining, knowing, yeah, right. You know you've seen it happen, right? Okay, perfect. No drowning. Still no drowning. Are you kind of, Grace, where are you at?
I'm just staying ready.
You're right on the line, right? So if you're asked to prepare others, though, right, to implement and sustain effective mentoring practices, so getting a little more, so you're asked to actually prepare others in your school to do it, to work with your administrators to actually develop strategies for preparing and sustaining a mentoring program, where might you be, right? I might drown. I have a little knowledge. I'm confident. Okay. Yeah, right? That's the key. Sustaining is key, right? Because I think I got one of the hopes, takeaways that you go back and you bring, it's kind of maybe like a trainer and a little bit of the aspect that you're talking about it at your schools, and that I might have some convincing to do with the principals around resources and time and commitment. Right? So that's helpful to know where people are at. Thank you. That works. Good deal. So raise a quick show of hands, elementary school teachers, really quickly. Yeah. So my daughter's in first grade, and I will tell you, I have been a teacher. So I've been in schools my whole life, right? As soon as I got out of college and grad school, I went back to a teacher, right? Then I've stayed in schools. But I'll tell you what, elementary school has been a humbling experience to watch what's happening and to watch language development, to watch my daughter learn how to read. Like literally in high school. Those are your high school teachers, like kids, they come back 10 years later, like, you're so influential, you're so helpful. I'm like, you're the biggest pain to me, right? Or after 10th grade, they come back at the early fall of their 11th grade, like, I love your class. I'm like, really? It's awesome. 3 you out once a week, right? That kind of high school, but in elementary school, right, there's this, this clear, like, you've done it, right? You taught. When I told my teacher, you taught my daughter how to read. It's amazing. I can watch that. So I have a fond appreciation for elementary school teachers that I didn't maybe have as a high school teacher, right? Because I watched how complicated it is, and particularly in the state of Colorado, where kids come and they don't have to go to kindergarten, and at pre-K, right, it can be problematic in some areas of the state as well. So I always say that too. I'm very appreciative of high school teachers, middle school teachers, but elementary school teachers, I'm very humble. So I want to start with thinking about why teacher mentoring matters. And I don't always like to make the correlation between schools and businesses, but this one seems to work well, right? About this notion of what happens if we invest in our people and they leave, right? This common thing. What happens when that happens? And the bigger question for me always is, like, what happens when we don't invest in those folks that are staying with us, right? As a mentor, coach, you're kind of a leader, right? You're taking a leadership role in how you talk about keeping folks in your school and in the classroom. Because I think back to that last question about how to sustain, talking about this in a recruitment and retention way, I think is a really important way to frame it, right? Because you guys defy this right here, though, a little bit, but you guys know teacher turnover is super high compared to other professions. But the 1 year of experience is the biggest pool of educators. Again, it's context specific, but as a whole, 1 year, right? But even 2-3 years, we know those folks definitely need support. And so thinking about, starting today, thinking about it from, you think about mentoring programs at your school, again, site-based, because you all will be site-based. If you're in a network, it might be network-based, but likely it's going to be site-based. It depends on leadership. I'm thinking about it from recruitment and retention, right? So it is about making teachers more effective, without a doubt, right? Instructional mentoring, getting them to be more effective in their instructional practices and the way they talk about teaching. But thinking about it, how do I get people into our school, knowing they're coming to my school, knowing that we're going to mentor them, we're going to support them, and also the ones that are there, actually keeping them there, right? Because as you know, turnover, how many folks do you know are leaving how many of you have folks leaving your school right now? Yeah, right? It's common. Yeah. But I think the notion of thinking it and sort of supporting it as a recruitment and retention effort, and thinking in that mindset, is really important. Because we know that if it's intentional, it's organized, prioritized, teachers will stay, right? I always compare it to when you take care of people, they tend to want to stay in their environment, right? And I think mentoring and being able to grow professionally is definitely one of those pieces. So I kind of want to show you some survey data that I think is pretty intriguing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Colorado Tell Survey. That teachers, so when teachers every year, it's kind of a national survey done state by state that they do to get perceptions about the field of teaching, right? I can't remember what organization, maybe it's it's not the New Teacher Center, they might be involved in it. It's a national organization that does a lot on teacher development, but they do it state by state, and Colorado obviously does it, sent out to every CDE, I believe, disseminates it to teacher leaders, to school districts, and they send it out. And if you take this notion that we know beginning teachers need intentional, comprehensive support. I would say all teachers need that, right? But we know that. I wanted to share some data that they did specifically around what new teachers, so 1 through 3 years in the state of Colorado, said about their experience around mentoring. And as you look on it, think about what this might mean for an experience of a teacher. So the first thing is, I'll pull 2 questions and some responses around it. So as a beginning teacher, I've received the following kinds of support during the year. And there are about 3,000, maybe 4,000 that replied. So in the state, 32% were not assigned a mentor, and 68% were, right? So that seems reasonable, but still 1/3 have no mentor, a brand new teacher to a district, to a charter school, wherever. Again, didn't disaggregate too much. Seminars specifically designed for new teachers. So about 40%, now we're going itching up a little more. No sort of organized support in a school around that. So meeting other people, right? That would include, so you're bringing together all the new teachers as a cohort or as a group. Release time to observe others. So getting opportunities. So more than half, no, right? And you guys all been through some sort of preparation modeling, how important watching others do something. So just thoughts about that. Any thoughts that pop in your mind when you look at that?
Looks a lot like my school.
A lot like your school, right?
See, like we built it in this year that there would be that time, but then teachers balked at it because, then I'm going to have to make plans for sub. Even if it's just another teacher watching your kids for a while they're doing whatever.
So this is some of these, like, pretty easy to do. Right? We can assign somebody. Having these maybe after school PD days, fairly easy, but this one gets a little harder, right? Release time, right? Having to watch. How does that work in a small school that has don't have a sub network to call on, don't have a lot of money? How do you do that, right? So that'll be something to mark down. Like the notion of, as we'll go on, I know someone had said I have this list that you got, some of you sent to Claire about guidelines for mentoring and how to do it and how to schedule time. Some of these things you'll check off. This is a hard one to do, to think about, but we know how important that is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that one is really fundamental because it can change the environment of the school too. Once you create an environment in which teachers have an open door where they can come in and out of classrooms.
Yep.
I think ours has become, what are you doing in my classroom?
Right.
Instead of, oh yeah, just, I don't even notice that you're there.
Yep. So I'm
It
gonna.
has so many outreach and consequences.
Yeah, so again, you're talking about cultural, so sustaining, right? You're talking about a cultural change, right? Because if you're allowing time for people to observe others, that means one, people are open to it, and two, there's an infrastructure to do it. And as you see from almost 4,000 new teachers, that's not happening in their school, right? But the culture piece, I think, to mark down is these notes. That's really important to have a conversation around. Yeah, JL, and then Ashley.
In our school, so I'm a model classroom for the primary through elementary, third grade, and then we have a model classroom for 6th through 8th.
Yep.
The feedback has been when they come into our room, it's unrealistic to do that. They think it's unrealistic to do that in their classroom.
Right.
So we've gotten a negative feedback because we have
Perfect.
offered model classroom.
Yep.
So I think I'm trying to figure out how do we make it possible, because it's not to say, it wasn't meant to be negative, it was meant to go, oh, come and observe.
Right. Right, we'll talk about those. Keep that in mind, right? We're going to come back to that. But that is, oh, I can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, but important. But I love the idea. That's a good example. And you're thinking about having, not everybody's doing it, but there's a model classroom.
Yeah.
A model teacher at every grade level, possibly. I don't know if that's too easy. But a model classroom, right? Let's hold on to that. I've never heard someone having negative feedback. That's interesting. So we're going to hold on to that.
I was shocked.
Yeah, I think we'll get to that piece.
It was
Can I interrupt? I want to interrupt. I want to welcome Martinez. Is that how I? Is that?
My name's Asisara, but I didn't
Yeah, well, say it. Let me try. I couldn't hear you. I couldn't hear you. Asusena. There you go. But now it says Martinez there, so I'm gonna put yeah, right? I'm just kidding. Asusena. Yeah. No. Where are you at? I'm sorry. Where are you at? What school? Okay. What grade is that? Oh, kinder. You guys should get it. Welcome. Asusena. Is that right? Perfect. Okay. Ashley, yeah.
So I actually, just yesterday, I was supposed to go in and observe a teacher, but things came up, and so I just brought in my Kindle, and I said, can you record yourself, watch yourself, and then what we'll do is next week we'll sit down and we will talk through some of the things that you noticed, some of the things that I noticed, and then come up with next steps. And I feel like that's, she's been teaching for longer than I have, and she's like, I've never recorded myself. And I said, well, you watch it first. And it was really eye-opening to her because she noticed some things that she really didn't pay attention to. And so it'll be interesting that when we sit down, we can actually use that as a tool to really talk through what she noticed and what she wants to work on and things like that. And so I feel like that's a way that it's not quite so scary.
And laborious, right?
Right.
Time-consuming. Shifting the schedule. So 2 things just popped up in that short thing. We're looking at this piece, model classrooms, and using technology, right? Because I can film myself as a mentor teacher, have someone watch it, get some time. I don't even need to be in the room with them. We do stuff at Metro. We use a video system. We use Google Docs, right, to share feedback and ideas. Right? So 2 things again, because I know one of the things that not being in DougCo, public schools, that you don't have, the resources are limited. So time, these are real constraints. But 2 things that pop up, I would say that we should keep in mind about how to observe each other, right? Because we're going to get to this because it's an important part of mentoring is observations and watching each other teach. It's really important, Jackie.
Before you move on, so one of the parts of being our instructional coaches, there are 3 of us, we're all 3 part-time, is that's part of our job is to cover the teachers so that they can go see. The other piece is we got a new principal a couple years ago. He's actually one of the teachers in our building, and it's a requirement of every teacher. So you don't have a choice. It's you give up a little piece of your plan, but he asks for 20 minutes every however often, and we get the same thing. Well, I can't do it like you do, but at the same time, there's a reflection piece that we have them do that says you might not be able to do it this way, but what could you do?
Right.
And I got feedback from one of the teachers that I worked with the other day. I did a PD session where I just kind of taught a class of teachers, like how I would teach my other kids. And they said, I couldn't teach it like that, but as my instructional coach, you never forced me to be exactly like you. You just said, there's lots, and I gave them
Right.
suggestions of people that might be more along their style.
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, get your principal on board.
Right, well,
We need
we'll-
people out in classes.
Right, so a couple things. So in the model classroom, we have getting leadership on board, and we
Yes.
have this notion of using technology. I think it's really important when you're talking about the flipped classroom, right? So technology clearly is available to do that kind of work. Something just went through my mind. Oh yeah, so best practice, right? Rooting in best practice, because it's hard when someone says do it like me. So best practice is always where we go. I always go to that notion. It's not you have to do exactly, but think about practice. Think about what research suggests. Think about what we're teaching. Think about the folks at the school. Those things to take it away from you a little bit, right? Again, you're going to hear lots of tidbits here. And if there's anything that pops up throughout the day, you have sticky notes. Obviously you guys done this. Stick them up there. I'll write some stuff up here and there. Because I want to make sure I tried to make sure all this stuff, these ideas and questions were covered. Let's look at another question. Well, this is very related. So on average, get about 4,000 new teachers. This is worrisome to me as a person who prepares new teachers. This stuff is happening, right? Because we're putting them in the school, and then we find out 3 years later they're leaving, right? And I'm this stuff isn't the total solution, but for me, it's like I'm doing all this prep work, and they're leaving, and I know this is a big gap. So on average, how often do you engage in each of the following activities with your mentor? Remember, assuming you were assigned a mentor, right? So these 32% are out. So we're only drawing on probably those 68% or so who are responding, because these 32% are doing nothing because they don't have mentors, right? Which I think very important. Principals assigning a mentor to a new teacher as a role, right? That would be as sustaining, right? That's actually a role in your school. So never once per week, less than once per month, almost daily, once per month, and several times per month. Being observed by my mentor in some capacity, right? So almost half, less than once per month. Which, if it was, that could be 7 times a year, possibly. But for a beginning teacher, particularly in a new environment, it could be difficult. Observing my mentor's teacher, so observing the mentor, so the person who's identified as probably best practice in the school, model classroom, almost 80%. Is that right? Yes, almost 80% math person. Ashley.
Sorry.
No, it's good. No, almost 80%. Less than once per month being able to actually watch a master teacher, right? And that, so again, wow, how do we do that piece? Right? That's important, because as a new teacher, I need to see best practice. Yeah.
So just what I've noticed in the new teachers that I've talked to and at job fairs and just right out of school, there's this expectation that they leave school and I am a teacher, I know all of the things. They're not that element, that mindset that I'm still growing and learning to be a teacher isn't there for a lot of them. I have 2 friends who moved out here from another state because there were no jobs in their state, and so they moved out here and they lived in Pueblo, and neither one of them had a growth mindset about it. I am a teacher, I know everything, and I'm looking at them both going, are you nuts?
Yeah.
You still have so much to learn. And they're in their 3rd year, and neither have ever had a mentor teacher.
I was up at 5 o'clock this morning looking over this, making notes and change. I'm so prepared, had the PowerPoint. No, I changed a couple things, right? But I think growth. So we're adding this list of growth mindset, right? But that's a cultural piece about you're coming to our school. We're doing these things, but reflection's important. But if you don't, I always say to folks, if you don't embed reflection into practice as part of the school, it doesn't happen. People don't become well, some people are generally self-reflective and growth mindset, but a lot of people become that way or are facilitated or have opportunities to develop that because they're in an environment that says, hey, you know what, you have time to do it. Let's sit and talk about your teaching. I mean, how often do people rarely say it to me, hey, let's just sit and talk about teaching. Just talk about what we're working in your classroom. Just that conversation is really, really important. So I think that growth mindset, you're right on. And when they come out of school, they don't know everything. Because I say to people all the time, teacher prep is really important. I think particularly our program, we do a good job, but nothing replaces being a full-time first-year teacher. Whether you're in a residency program, you're in a student teaching placement, nothing is like what happens in November when one of your kids something happens to them, right? Or you have to be in a lesson, you're teaching a lesson, and you're struggling with this group of students, and it's day after day after day. Nothing replaces that situation. For a principal leaving, nothing replaces that. Your colleague leaving, you have to cover that. Nothing replaces that experience, right? Yeah, actually.
Just a quick build on that. I was applying for an internal position, and I had to teach a lesson in an 8th grade classroom, and I have never taught anything above 5th grade besides substitute teaching in 6th grade. And one of the 8th grade advisors was watching me, and he said, how did you get them to get up and move? I have them every single day, and I can't get them to move. And it's just like, you have to know what they want. You have to know, you have to be open to what they're available to. He's like, well, how did you learn how to do that? I said, there's not a piece of me, like truly me, inside me anymore. I take a piece of this teacher and I use it. I take a piece of that teacher and I use it. I've done this, I've seen this from this teacher and I use it. It's like, I don't know if there's any authentic Ashley in there anymore, because I'm a molded mess of everything that I've ever seen. And so to have that growth mindset and to be able to apply that, I think it's really important that new teachers understand that as you grow in your craft, you're not growing yourself, you're growing from everything that you've assimilated.
Right, and watching others do it, right? I mean, this is the point, is like, I always sit in the school, I go to schools all the time, and I watch teachers, I'm like, hey, that's a good idea. You know, I take it back to my university, I'm like, I'm gonna blow y'all's minds, I'm gonna do this kind of activity, right? I mean, I think that is, that formative assessment I did really quickly, I picked that up for a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, the 100 thing is kind of weird, and I don't know how I play that out with like adults, and, you know, but I took that idea of like, oh, I should have a better idea of where people are. But you got to actually watch people teach to do that. You know, reading stuff is great, but watching people do it, you're like, now I understand what you did with your sort of physical proximity to get that student who never pays attention in your class to move. I get it, right? I get what you did 5 minutes before you had a larger discussion when you walked by and whispered in their ear and said, I want you to go second. Like, you don't get those sometimes by just reading or attending a large district or school or network.
I feel like for first year teachers, just from experience, and these questions, the main thing is first, before you even hit a curriculum, is classroom management. What is going on since you teach at the university? Are they learning classroom management? Is it a practice they're watching each other teach a community device too? Because I feel like that's like 90% of the problem.
Right.
If there's no classroom management, there is no time for it.
Yeah. So true. I say this all the time to folks, is that good instruction, effective engaging instruction, effective assessments, you know, alleviates classroom management. So not to keep us going, classroom management is an important one that I think came up in the list of mentoring around classroom management. Because again, even in a teacher prep program where our students spend 1,000 hours or so in the classroom, it's not their classroom. Until it's your classroom, they're your expectations, they're your routines. You know, the students are always kind of looking up to the teacher of record, right? They're always looking, even though the student teacher's there, the residents, we have folks in for a year in classrooms, but always looking, it's not your classroom. So that's one area I think that mentoring is really important. Instructional mentoring is important around like, but classroom management, what does that look like, right? What do my routines look like in my classroom? I have a mentor come in my classroom, what routines do I have set up, right? Yeah, reflection, and I'm bad, like, I love talking, so I'm gonna keep us on schedule, and I promise. We're gonna break at the right time, we're gonna eat lunch at the right time, and you'll get out of here. I promise. I'll manipulate. I love to hear. So keep raising your hands. We'll adapt. So reflection, I think, which came up. So we have with the reflection piece, right? So only about, let's do my math real quick. About 40%, 45% or so are actually engaged in constant reflection. Remember, that's from a small pool of 68%. So this is reflection on teaching. This is just talking about your practice and what works. It could be about the common students that Grace and I have, the difficult students, the gifted students that they have, so any reflection, right? So again, we're starting to pull out, one of the things I want you to walk away with is real takeaways of things, and I've already heard some wonderful things emerge, but you're starting to already get this notion of culture and how important it is. And that starts at the top with coaches, but also starts with principals and admins who are saying, look, we need to do this because it's about recruitment, it's about bringing folks in, it's about retention, it's about keeping them here, it's about making them more effective, right? And as a teacher, I'll tell you as a mentor, you get better because when you have to lay bare your practices and go, you know what, Tina, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why. It's a good question you asked me. I should, even as a master teacher, maybe you're like, yeah, I should have thought about, no, I didn't see Heather back there not paying attention and standing up and on her cell phone and talking. Not that you are, I'm not this teacher. Heather's like, oh my God, I was just texting, he caught me, So I think it makes you a better teacher as well, right? So it's not just about the mentee, but as a mentor, when you have to do this work and you have to watch yourself teach and then have them talk about your teaching and you talk about your teaching, like, wow, I really do that with my hands all the time. So do I always stand like, this teacher was like, I never realized how I always stand close to the board. I'm like scared of my students, right? Jackie, yeah.
Funny you should say that. One of the
Yeah.
teachers that I
It's usually science and math, high school math.
It's high school science. High school
Yes,
science.
always.
So funny you should say that. One of the teachers first year was observing me, and she did exactly that. Do you know you only walk right here? I was like, oh, wow. But at my room, there's too many backpacks for kids. But that's not what I want to know. The one thing I was curious about at our school, we tend to assign mentors to their mentees based on content.
Yep.
Not necessarily. So in the second question, observing the mentor, sometimes that's not the best person for them to go see. It just happens to be someone in their content area.
Yeah.
What's the better way to pick a mentor? Because I actually had this on my agenda
Yeah.
to talk to my class about.
We were actually, I had some
Did
brief,
you?
well, I had some
That was
brief,
my sticky note.
oh, I had some brief
Okay, I know.
conversations about co-teaching, right? What does that look
Right.
like when you're the only social studies teacher? And we'll talk more about that. But I
Well,
think it could work both ways. I think there's an advantage to it, right? I think it's always great to have somebody in your discipline. So another 5th grade teacher, if you have that, or another 4th grade, because they're somewhat close. Another science teacher, another social studies teacher. I think that helps because one, you're teaching some more content, right? And some of the things that you're dealing with in a classroom are really important. So I think that works well. But on the other hand, when I go watch or a math teacher comes and watches and me teach as a social studies teacher, I'm doing way different stuff, right? Their notion of math's got to be in lines and rows, and it's all textbook based, and there's no narrative involved, and there's no discussion based, right? And they come and see me do some stuff. I'm like, look, you can do it this way, right? Or an English teacher who I watch, and I'm like, wow, I never seen you use rubrics that way. That's really impressive. I never thought about that because I use rubrics. So I think it goes both ways. It's about what your needs are. If content is a really important need, that can be an area. It just depends on what your specific needs are. If it's about general instructional practice, classroom management, I can watch anybody. To be honest, I joke that I should take the folks in my instructional methods course over on campus. My kids went to. We have a pre-K goes to kindergarten on campus at Metro. It serves like the community. So it's probably a area early learning center. It's a great place. I joke I should always take my students over, my high school teachers who say they can't do group work and cooperative learning, and take them into an EC classroom where there are 27 students, and the teacher's like just chilling, and she's doing an assessment on the side, and then her kids are all at stations doing stuff. And then the science teacher's got 17-year-olds like, I got a lecture at it, right? So even in that case, I could be a teacher of a high school science classroom and go to an EC classroom and go, wow, I love your grouping. How'd you do that? And how in the world did you think about setting up those 7 different stations?
So are you thinking then more mentors based on teacher need versus mentors based on, because you teach the same content? Because
Yeah.
in all honesty, we have a scenario right now.
Yeah.
A first-year teacher, and the only other person that's in her content area is not one of our best teachers.
Yeah,
and
right.
That's her mentor.
Yeah.
And so she's always coming to me.
Right.
I don't teach music.
So it's a couple things. One is actually giving. So I imagine that mentor is not going to have the tools to be
Right,
a mentor, right? That's
exactly.
one thing.
And
But
we'll
I
get
don't.
that.
I think it depends on context, right? Because you have some constraints, and I think that you can have a good mentor outside your content area.
Okay.
When you're focused on best practice, like do you use formative feedback? Do you use rubrics? How do you interact with students, right? How do you deal with a student who's constantly talking? Like those are all common things. Now that's different than elementary and high school, right? But I think you can still take some of those routines in a classroom.
I think that's
Routines in a high school classroom, like right. Learning walks are great. Yeah. And so there's another piece, learning walks, right? So framing it in kind of something research oriented around how to go see people.
That's what we tend to do
Yep.
is have them as their visits go see
Yep.
teachers that aren't in their content area, but when she has needs, she can't go to her
Yep.
mentor teacher.
And another teacher outside your content can come and watch you teach and give you feedback. We'll talk about how to give what that feedback could look like on an evaluation. To give people formative feedback on your sort of on an evaluative framework. Yeah. So I think Jackie, it depends.
Yeah.
I think it depends on need. A little
What's
bit.
available.
What's available, but I think 2 things is one is that person probably needs support.
Yes,
To do that.
absolutely.
Yeah. Sarah and then Stephanie. Then we'll.
So we
The next
partner mentors up with mentees by, we get with the hiring team.
Uh-huh.
And the hiring team gives our new hires a survey of how they like to get feedback, what they want to learn in the first year, whether it's first year at the academy or just first year teaching. And there's just some questions on there, and then we sit down, the induction team and the hiring team sit down and go over the surveys.
Uh-huh.
And obviously the hiring team has been with that new hire a little bit, so they kind of got that person's personality. And then we just place them almost like classroom placement with who we think they would match with personality wise.
Okay.
And what, if we know there's one person over here who's got great classroom management, maybe they teach third grade, but this new hire is a sixth grade teacher, but they really want to focus on classroom management, we still pair them up.
The survey, yeah, the survey.
Yeah,
Sure.
Survey works. Well, that's a great idea. And
That
to that
would-
point, I was about to share. Just ask, like, Stephanie, you're brand new to the school. You just came out. You have no teaching experience. What do you need? Or Grace, you have 6 years. You've come here from Nebraska. What do you need? The needs of those two teachers in your school totally different. Stephanie can barely get a routine. I don't even know what I do the first day of school. And then Grace is like, you know what I need? I'm trying to get my students to be more critical thinkers, even at the Montessori. So I need mentoring in that. That need of Stephanie and Grace is totally, we're gonna look at the trajectory of a first year teacher is totally different. So I think that survey and just asking, what do you need? What support
We're
do you
doing
need?
it
Is
too.
great.
Like we're saying, everyone needs to have a mentor, and we want to make sure that we're covering
Yep.
that need and not thinking about it more purposefully. And if we waited until even the first week of school,
Yep.
the induction team and all that can take care of things.
Yeah,
until
right.
then.
Need is really important because as you find in all schools, people come in differently and there's needs about, I joked with someone in a rural district that I was working with outside Glenwood Springs, and their needs for mentoring are different than someone in DPS. Because their needs, they were telling me, is I need to tell them where to go to church. I need to tell them where to go to the grocery store. I need to help them find a circle of friends because in Leadville, like on Friday night, there's not much going on. Someone in Denver doesn't need that as much. So the needs, that's a kind of a really contrast. But when you think about that I was, shared this a couple times when Claire showed me this map of charter schools. I'm very familiar with kind of urban charter schools, just because I lived in DC for a long time. But the charter schools that are in the middle of literally nowhere in Colorado, right? A lot of space. Those needs literally might, and we're going to get into it a little bit. It might be some more personal needs to keep them in the school and help support them be better teachers. Like having a social network in a rural place. That's really important for your happiness and your ability to engage in a community. Whereas at DPS, people don't need that. They live in Denver, right? They have friends, and so be it. Yeah. So Stephanie, real quick. So you want to add? Can she finish?
It was
Or go
interesting
ahead.
because, I'm sorry, did you say?
No.
I'm
Either
just
way.
going to give an example. We had
And then Stephanie, I'm sorry.
15-year teacher get hired this year to teach 6th grade.
Yeah.
Master teacher, pretty much. Basically took this job because her husband got relocated to Colorado and just took a huge demotion down to a 6th grade position. She was like a district literacy person.
Okay.
But we have everyone who gets hired at the academy goes through induction the first year. So she wasn't pleased with that, number one.
Yeah.
We ended up partnering her with our 12th grade English lead who went through the whole national board certification.
Okay.
So they got partnered up, and then she actually just went on to do national board certification.
There you go.
So she was just one that was hard to place, and so it wasn't even like she really needed anything.
That's what I struggle with. I have a 6-year science teacher in middle school, and every time I go ask her, what do you need?
And that's a growth mindset, right? Because I don't need
Yeah.
anything, but where do I want to get better? Right? Where do I want to
Yeah,
improve?
that
Right? So a
was-
couple things. So needs of you folks, finding out, and then matching. Right? These things are all emerging, right? These are all matching support. Stephanie, then we'll move forward.
I just wanted, my question has been answered,
Oh.
but one thing I think is interesting that was mentioned is that many teachers don't know what they need, and we
It's true.
wanted to give them their mentors, like their first day of school.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of waiting maybe after we do our induction, because we're a
Yep.
PBL school, and it's very challenging for a lot of teachers to really understand what problem-based learning is versus project-based learning. And so they're not gonna know what they need
Sure.
until after that week.
It's another good example.
That'll
Yeah.
probably be my biggest takeaway.
I know, I'm totally great.
No.
Thank you.
So there's another good example, right? So we're talking about classroom management needs. We're talking about if your school's built around Montessori or project-based learning or expeditionary learning, or we were talking about that. You need to, that's a clear piece. Even a 15-year teacher needs some honing because you have to norm a philosophy of what you're doing, right? And I always say to people, when you want to create a really effective, sustainable mentoring programs, when you're searching for teachers, and maybe you're involved, maybe you're not, but that notion of growth mindset, engaging in it is part of the job ad, right? I was doing some work with a district about co-teaching, and one of their complaints is nobody like we have this mindset people don't want to co-teach as far as like general educator, special educator. And I said, well, one of the things you have to do as a new teachers you're hiring, because they hire between 5 and 10 at this large high school every year, it's got to be in the job description. So you're recruiting people who are either familiar with it, or at least you're like, you know what, I don't know anything about co-teaching, but I would love to work with a special educator, or vice versa, right? And so it's about bringing them in. So getting that integrated into your job, into the job as part of it. Like you're coming on, Bethany, in our school, it's just part of it. Oh, you're not into it? Well, this might not be the best space for you. Assuming you can do that, right? Teacher shortages, right? But I think it's a worthwhile cost. So again, let's get to, we're gonna get moving. We're a little behind, but I'll catch us up. So I always show folks this really nice, really very hard to get through research study. They did this. They took all this research and did a meta-analysis about ways in which mentor teachers are involved with teacher preparation and development, right? 11 ways they came up with. So what I want to do is everybody take a look at these. And the first question is there anything here that to you in your mindset might not make sense? For example, people sometimes say conveners of relations. What does that mean, right? And literally that's like introducing people in your school. Someone comes, they don't know anybody. Actually, as a mentor, you're actually introducing the librarian, the specialist, the administrator, right? When I do this with student teaching folks, like proper teachers have to actually introduce student teachers around the building. Say, look, this is what this person does if you need the support. So are there any other ones before we do some example, thinking about context that don't make sense? That's the one that always people like are unsure of. Is there anything else up there?
Could you talk a little bit about purveyors of context?
So purveyors of context, any thoughts about what that might mean? Really relevant to all of you because of your work.
It's putting the stressor that somebody's feeling or the thing that's going on in context, so they get the big picture.
Right, particularly about the school you're in.
Yeah.
So like you come to a new school, like honestly I can go to Cherry Creek and I kind of have a general idea, right? But if I walked into one of your high schools, I probably would have to say, well, who are these students? Why do they choose here? What's the deal with the structure? What happens when I have a sub? Like what's the principal like? There's been some turnover, right? All those things about context, it's like the down low. It's not the what is it? You say the lunchroom talk, the teacher's lounge talk. It's not that. It's real stuff that about the functioning of the school that someone walking in, it's like, dang, I wish I knew that 8 months ago. Everybody had that experience? Like that would have been helpful. I was joking with this school district about, I was like, who makes the schedule? And they're like, well, they're kind of, hemming and hawing about who actually does. I was like, who actually makes the schedule? And finally someone chimed up and he didn't want to. The principal was like, well, my administrator says that she doesn't. And I was like, well, that's good. We need to know that now. I don't want to know that in 8 months because then I'm talking to you about the schedule and this and that. But really, she has total control over it. Like, I need to know that right now because that's the person that implements change. If I want to, have off periods, she's the one that's going to figure it out. It's not you, right? So purveyors of context, like, what is it you want this teacher to know that in 6 months you don't want them to like, wow, Teresa, thanks. Could have not walked into that wall 3 times, right? So what I want to do is, for a few minutes, is with your partner on your sticky notes, I think that's what I had, is what do these actually, take a few of these and what do these look like in practice? Like what would it actually look like in practice to do this work, right? Specifically, so taking these ideas, providers of feedback, what would that actually look like day to day? So I'm going to have Jackie go there. If you mind, pop it up here and move with Grace, just so we have some pairs. Does that work? You could also turn around, Grace, if you want to, that way, either way. So again, just on the sticky notes, examples of what these might look like in actual practice. You don't have to just write the examples on there. We're going to kind of post these up and share some.
So I think this practice. So you walk in and you've been to Pinterest and you've seen all the Pinterest photos and you want to read Pinterest. That is not
That is not
Pinterest.
And I guess better to frame the question is how might you do it next year in the fall?
So,
what's most important?
Yeah, what's most important is not the most important.
As evidenced by my lack thereof after 10 years of teaching.
No, but where to get the resources to do right? Seriously, like I don't know where to do that. Like, I just had someone else do it.
Well, I had a mom come in. She had a cricket.
That's true. That's like,
And I went,
as funny as that might sound, but where do I get ideas to do that?
Ideas, but you can't live by it.
No,
That's the thing, and that's and not be teacher.
So we have, so every year we have new teachers join us, or even old ones who say this is going to be the year. And when we hired last year, every time I went into a room, I have to get my room together. I got to get my room together. I got to get my room together. I said, that's great, but what about the kids? Do you want to know if you're teaching the kids? Do you want to know about the kids? And she was like, get my room together. And we were still an absolute trash by the first time. But yeah, she wanted it to look a certain way. I'm like, but the kids are going to do this grading. Yeah, the kids are going to do this. So what's most important? So I think that's scaffold. Even with like new systems. So grading systems. Next week we're going to shoot for 2. Because I have 2 long-term guest teachers who we hired who still put nothing in the grading system because they can't figure out how to use it. And they're 18 days left.
So,
I don't know. We're going to write the grade reports together. Yeah.
Practical to ask the kids to do X, Y, and Z if they don't have a
Yeah.
It's really anticipating what knowledge they want to take their coming from so that you can navigate any circumstances. You can't, I mean, you can have high expectations, but you have to know when to, for lack of a better
That's why I use this whiteboard. What's in a biter of change? Because all I hear myself thinking is the do bias, which just kind of hangs out.
But an abiding of change to me means that you are the facilitator.
Oh, okay.
You have, and they're going to hear it from you
Yeah.
before they hear it from them. So you need to be that voice of change where you are
take about 2 to
acknowledging,
3 minutes. 2 to 3 minutes.
you're acknowledging what they come to write, and you are facilitating them through the steps of how they come to it.
Okay.
So like with the veteran teacher that I videoed, she's like, I never realized that I wouldn't when I teach. I have this little hanging thingy here, and I'm like, okay, but is that, I mean, and it was fun, but I had her watch her video first, because it's like, I want you to notice what you think are the important
Yes.
and just throw them out.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, for the week.
Yeah.
Is that really, I know, but she did, so, I mean, those are the obvious things that she does.
Yeah.
The T-Rex times, right? It's obvious to everybody else, but not necessarily the message that I use.
Yeah.
And so it's really, okay, so providers of change, understanding what they want, or what they think they need,
Yeah.
telling them whether or not it is needed,
Yeah.
and then helping them change things that are needed.
Okay.
So coming together as a meeting of the minds and really figuring out what you need to leverage the best results.
So, really quickly, so as you finish conversations, can you come up and throw them, just take them up here? As you have one person come up and just stick them up anywhere. As you finish conversations.
I'm just sorry about
It's all right. Okay. Trust me, it can't be worse than mine.
okay. When I started teaching, my mom said, you really need to learn how to write. Because I write like a
And we
secretary.
don't. I know one thing that teacher prep I don't focus on is how to write on the board. But I do tell students they need to practice more.
Oh, see, you've got this beautiful, perfect.
I was a first grade teacher for 2
Oh.
years, and I taught preschool for 1, so.
Oh, see, so.
All of my posters are
Mine are crooked because I can't reach the top.
Mine are crooked for.
Thank
They
you.
always say that, like, why
Praise.
don't you put them straight?
I'm like, because I'm standing on a chair and I'm
For me, it's because if it's even a tiny bit off, forget it.
I'm gonna read some of these off here. I'm gonna read some of these off here in 1 second. And think for a second, just as you before I read some of these off, how might you actually, back to what I was talking about what we're going to do today, about how all this stuff can be used, but to have a mentee and to sit with them for 25 minutes over coffee or after school for a drink, wherever you do it, and say, look, these are 11 ways, specific ways I want to support you. These are things that I know research best practice says we need. What do you need, right? Where there's some gaps, well, what do you mean by context? And you explain that, go, oh yeah, can you please tell me about, like, what is an administrative assistant to a principal do? Or how does a special educator support specialist going to help me? Because she was very rude to me. He was very rude, right? I mean, so you see how you could use this in a conversation, because part of this is you have to have explicit conversations about this stuff. So I'm going to read some of these. And I'm going to start with Grace. Is going to start with this up. We're going to get to this in a few minutes when I give you a real framework to use. Is have joy for the profession, right? Specifics. Abiders of change, helping mentees understand and plan will leverage change. Be open to your own growth as a mentor, I assume. Research-based practices, so relating to using data, right? Modelers of practice, supporters of reflection, using data, right? Very specific thing you could do. We got lots. Fostering environment where there's support. I was just sharing about gatekeepers. The number one reason why teachers leave, they report in that mental health survey, is lack of instructional support. That's the number one reason why people leave the field in the state of Colorado, at least. Since gatekeeping, we can bring folks in and we can bring them into the profession as experienced teachers, or we can push them out by not offering support, by closing our doors, by not sharing materials, and essentially making them dislike our environment. And they're like, you know what? Teaching might not be for me. As veteran teachers, we actually have a lot of power over whether people stay or leave in the way in which we care for them and the way in which we support them. We got modelers of practice, observation, establishing observations, providing feedback, being available for questions. Hey, saying to someone, you ever think about your students? Like, think about how you work with your students. A teacher who never says, if you have questions, come ask me. Versus a teacher who every day is like, hey, there's a parking lot with questions, or hey, I'm going to stop the last 10 minutes of class and let you guys ask just any question you want, or I start class with questions, or we do classroom meeting, right? Or in elementary school, we do circle time at the beginning of school, right? Think about that notion of just making yourself available for questions and making it clear. That does wonders, because suddenly Heather feels okay coming up and saying, a really stupid question, but can you tell me with a copy how to make a copy or color, print and color, because I can't do it, right? So I think the notion of that's simple, it sounds so simple, right? But sometimes people don't feel, I never felt like, as a good example, I could go to my assigned mentor in my school, who's my department chair, and ask questions because I didn't want her to think I was stupid, so then she wouldn't evaluate me, and so I just didn't ask questions. I didn't ask her questions, and I kind of did some things wrong and figured it out on the fly.
I just want to say that I've opened myself up to people come to me for questions, but then they don't want to bother me. That's the thing later. I'm like, why did you come to me? And I don't want to bother you.
So how do you do that, right? It's a great question, because you want to be available for questions, but I think we were talking earlier that people are coming into your room all the time. So other formats, right? Email, Google Doc, put it up in your room, like a spot where they can just put down, I can write in here, and you're my mentor, as a team, I drop some stuff off. On your desk, and put 4 sticky notes. The questions about things I need help on, right? And then Tina looks at them, and later at night, she writes an email and says, look, thanks for doing that. I was busy today, but here's your responses, right? So that time when you're trying to teach with kids and someone's like, you know how we are with students, like, I used to say, don't ask me questions in the first 10 minutes. Like, I need to start class, I need to make sure everybody's safe and everybody's in their seats and doing what they need to do, and then I'll take your question. If you need it, put it on the sticky note thing, and put a question up there, right? So I think the face-to-face sometimes is the only way we assume we can mentor or support, but thinking about how else you can address questions in a discreet way, maybe. They don't have to say it to you, or it can be relayed in a real formal way, right? Yeah.
We can share like whoever the induction people are or the mentors are. That maybe that first couple weeks of school, they're making themselves very visible.
Right.
They're stopping by, once or twice a week, maybe even every day at the beginning, just to be like, hey, do you have any questions? Do you need anything right now?
Right.
Because then that opens that whole, for the rest of the year, that it makes everyone else feel like, oh, okay, well, this person obviously is open to questions.
And supporters of reflection, right? If I have a cohort of new teachers, 3 new teachers, I'm going to find a way to pair them up. Because a lot of these questions, that person, do you know where I get this done? Or how do I order a skateboard? Because not for right? I don't want to go by one, right? Things like that are really important. So with these, with anything you get today, your expertise and what you need content specific is where you start to apply these about what you need. We're availing out lots of best practices. Lots of good stuff up here, teaching the lesson, modeling, right? But modeling more is not just teaching, but modeling is how do you talk to the principal? How do you interact with the principal? Do I call him or her doctor? What's the rapport that you have between other teachers? Like, who is really old school? You know, who is very innovative, right? How do you model how you interact with people within your context, right? How you talk to them. So I mean, that's really important. You talk about going out and having drinks in the middle of the day in front of kids, or do you have a much more professional environment, right? You know, all of you are shaking your heads like, I've heard this conversation. But I think that modeling is not just instruction, but how do you go day to day in a school? Because we sometimes don't, we've never been in this new context. I don't know how to act, right? We read signs everywhere, even coming in here. I'm reading signs of what you guys need, want, if you're interested, if you're snoozing, right? Or if there's suddenly 10 people in the bathroom. So I think that's really important. So applying these. So flip over to the next piece right here. We want to get out some takeaways for you. So what I want to do with your partners, right? Again, these are going to look different. I think that like one of the challenging things about mentoring, we're going to get out, I'm going to give you some specific best practices. But some of it you have to make sense of is to think about, what characteristics, if you're defining an effective mentor, you're to think about what it is, right? We talked about what it is, the formative assessment, what it is and what it's not. Like, what are the defining characteristics in your mind of an effective mentor, right? So let's start to list those in that left-hand column. You don't have to list 30. There's a backside, but you know, idea is to start to vet out, because I think for you, you know, as I tell students, is that, you know, you have to focus on certain areas for growth. So for you leaving today, you're gonna leave here and say, look, these are 5 characteristics I think are really important. I took all this stuff and you can make a list of 25 things that a mentor needs to do or to think like. But you're gonna have to say, look, these are 5 things I'm gonna focus on when I go back, and they're really important to me. I'm gonna block out all the other noise, and I'm gonna focus on these 5, so I think these are good practices, and we're gonna try to implement those, right? So we're starting that work right now. So what characteristics? I'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes of an effective mentor. Almost back.
Oh, that's really good. I like that. We should just talk.
We should. I'm wearing
Ideas?
non-evaluated.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. I guess you're not
definitely.
judgmental.
Collaborative, yeah. So we do it as a group. And that's your ideas.
Third, update advocate, appointment, resource manager, non-evaluator. What else do we do?
You should share like some things. You know, I find sometimes I go to some places and I'm like, yeah, so I did teacher evaluation, you know, of course, for like a public school, non-charter school district, you know, like, yeah, I do this for the school and I'm also a coach. So how do you, and I'm like, well, how do people do job speak out when they're struggling? They don't. Right, you got it. It's hard though, it's hard.
Yeah.
But it's
Because I mean, like,
important.
I will be, but it's not going to be, it's going to be just like with kids. We're looking for retirement.
So
And
that's the
so it's
conversation.
not.
You gotta alleviate that fear, because in some
Yeah.
school districts where I'm judging you whether you're gonna come back or not,
Yeah.
there's no way I'm gonna tell you anything I'm sharp on. Because that's I'm gonna lie and dog and pony show the whole time.
Yeah.
So you think I'm amazing, even though I'm hiding
Yeah.
everything, because I'm scared what you're gonna do, and I say, you know what, I have to stop doing these. You said you're saying, what's the problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a
think
guy
you're right.
that I think he's
an admin at TT, and he said,
Okay.
our,
Up in Boulder.
yeah, his little guy dark hair left. It's really
And then
loud.
Megan Freeman.
Yeah, this guy's brilliant, and he said, our job as administrators and coaches is to grow people out of their jobs. And it's to get them to the point that they're developing professionally so that they want to, they can choose to stay.
Yeah.
But they're growing in a way that they can become a mentor for someone else, that they can become a teacher for another teacher. So that they're not just stuck in the microcosm.
But when you're stuck in a position where this person's going to just help decide whether I can job or not, then it's a little scary. Yeah, definitely. But I think having that conversation around what you do, that's important, right? That's a school level conversation. So we're in the classroom. It's not like I'm in trouble. Because it'll happen. People won't want to talk to you, or they won't want you in the room.
I'm gonna say that.
Yeah. I think that's very important.
I have a grammar.
What's that?
You have a typo.
I do.
What did do these?
Oh, yeah.
Are you trying to kill me? Yeah.
I'm very anal too, so that actually bothers me.
We had a class teacher come in last week, and he was trying to make the co-teacher have a plan, and she had left for another coach. And discussed, you know, because no one else was doing it. And he was trying to argue with the kids that something was not I'm starting to assert independence. So just stop. Just stop. You're gonna so you don't want to fight with it. And he's adamant, no, that's not allowed.
Take about 2 minutes, and we're going to share. So as you're doing this, as you go through, and most of you have identified 5 or 6 or 7. Can you star a couple that you think are like the most important that you might share out? Like, of course, they're all important, likely, but you know, we got to focus somewhere to share out some ones that are top.
Well, I do see the carpal line, when they take it out. Yeah, all of them. And your little.
If you need it translated, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I just asked him, so what do you see?
So if I could bring everybody back, I want to share. I want to share 3 from up here that came up looking at these. So somebody had written about advocates of the practical, about what's most important in the school, right? Like what's most actually important to the administrators, to the school culture. I would also add up here that I haven't seen specifically, but that sometimes we new teachers think that they're there to save the world. And I always just make this joke as an associate teacher that when I teach about the Byzantine Empire, y'all are going to love it. You're love it as much. You know, that was like, I thought my students were going to love history like I loved it. And that was very clear to me after the second week that probably I made most of them hate history, right, with my passion. But I think there's this notion, right, the new teachers think they come in and be like, I'm going to save everybody. Everybody's going to love it. And that's not a reality, right? It's a long haul. Like, it's a really long haul. And as a 9th grade teacher in a high school, sometimes I wouldn't see the fruition of my labor until they're 11th and 12th graders, and they see me in the hallway, and I've been just badgering them, you know, for 3 or 4 years about coming to school and doing what they need to do and thinking about college and those kind of things. Also, another one I thought was really interesting, and then I'll grab you.
All right.
That'll be helpful. The other one is effective communication. Not overwhelming new teachers with too many things. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to do that, and that, and that, and that. Again, narrowing it down to what is the most important. Because that's a common thing we do because you've been a teacher for a while and you've been at the school, and we sometimes don't even realize that we're actually doing that. You just gave me 27 things to do, and School starts tomorrow. What's the most important thing, mentor? What do I need to focus on for tomorrow? Yeah, I'll soon say. So.
What you said earlier,
Yep.
I think with mentors, you have to be careful with, because if they are coming in with like, oh, I'm gonna save the world, like, oh, for sure.
At the same time.
Idealism, right? Yeah,
Because
right.
you can tell the ones that have been in schools for a while, and they do kind of sometimes get a little jaded. Not bitter, it's like, really, do I want to become that?
I wrote on my thing, bad and jaded.
Yeah, so that is so true, right? Stay out of the lunch, stay out of the workroom, right? But I think the notion of like what's practical, because I think sometimes I see it all the time, altruistic, idealistic teachers, whether they come from alternative routes or traditional sort of university, they just, the misconception of the impact that they're going to have immediately is sometimes their thought process is way too big. We have impact, but I think understanding what impact looks like and what impact means in a school, I think for new teachers who've never spent 5, 6, 7 years in the trenches, they don't know what that means, right? They don't know that, like, look, this student is struggling these 2-3 months, but that your job is at the end of the year to say, look, he understands how to answer a document-based question, right? But that took 8 months, and the teacher's so frustrated after 3 months, like, I don't understand. Like, this kid just doesn't get it. Like, I don't understand what's happening. And knowing that's part of the process, right? I think for new teachers, you don't want to be like, yeah, these kids are all stupid, or like, administration sucks. The jadedness is not where I'm at. It's like, what is a real practicality that we do influence people's lives, but it looks different in 2nd grade, and it definitely looks different in 11th grade, right? Just, whether it's socially we're impacting them, psychologically, instructionally, those kind of things. So I think being really honest with teachers and saying, hey, look, just because your first lesson, your first week didn't go well, you don't suck. You're not a terrible teacher, and your students don't hate you. They're probably not even thinking about this lesson that they had yesterday. They probably don't even care about it, right?
So as we're transitioning to more of us are going to be teaching adult learners,
Yep.
would you say that we should apply that same expectation that we're not going to see them change right away?
Totally.
And have that same
Like,
patience that
no,
it would take?
my wife can
have you
attest to
seen
that with
Okay.
me, right? No, seriously, that's the same concept, right? You're in for, when you're changing mindsets, right? You guys talked about culture. You talked about how growth mindset came up here, thinking about letting people in your room. That takes some time, right? Because they've likely had bad experiences with it, or it's not the way they were raised, or it's not their upbringing. So I think that with any sort of teaching and learning, right? Where people are and where they're at, right? It's the hardest thing people don't understand about our field is that every student's not the same place. So increased performance or achievement was different. Change behavior was different for everybody because they're all starting. So I think I would say the same thing, is that baby steps, right? And as a teacher, you say, God, I spent this whole year, I'm terrible at my job, or you're trying to force people to do too much. You have to slowly bring them in if you want to get them to think about this notion of being mentored or actually serving in that role.
So we should have clear objectives then for
Definitely.
ourselves that we have those baby steps for them.
Right.
Because otherwise I can see myself being extremely disappointed by it.
Yep. So I think on your own, like setting goals. If you're starting a program, what are the goals? If you're an individual mentor, what goals? And that's the conversation between the two of you, right? I mean, that's this conversation. Because anything we're doing, you could sit down and have this conversation. Hey, you're brand new to the school. You're a first-year teacher. What do you think makes an effective mentor? And suddenly you're saying one thing, and I'm saying another thing, and it's like, whoa, those things. I need to be left alone. You're like, I need to meet with you, right? Wow, wait a second, that doesn't work. I'm a better learner when we meet every day. We talk every day. And the other person's like, I'm a better learner if we meet via email once a week at a really organized time. And suddenly you guys have two different perceptions about what effective communication means, and then it blows up, right? Because you haven't had that conversation, set goals about priorities for a relationship, right? So all this stuff we're doing, things I would suggest you sit with, right? And have some conversations around. Yeah, Joe.
I found that with first year teachers, October is the hardest month of the semester. And I kind of let that be the October pot, be on,
Right.
giving them muffins at their door, things
Yeah.
to boost them up because they felt so depleted at that point.
Yeah.
They're down in the
Right.
dump, and October's like, I'm here finishing all weekend.
So I was going to show you guys just a little while, but I have to do a little, a little preemptive here. Look at this down here, talking about October. That's like survival and disillusionment, right? That's the spot, right?
Worst month.
Right, it is, and look, it's so funny you say that, but because when you look at this research on phases of first year teaching, right, anticipation, they're so excited, I'm going to change the world, and suddenly it's like October 28th, and they're like, gosh, I'm buried, students hate me, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I mean, You sort of nailed it. Yeah.
I
I think
think
they
that's
need to-
changed since you've had standardized testing.
There's a part in March.
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 It feels like it's on
Yeah,
the
right.
I think they need to delete the first year teacher, because for a lot,
What?
We
Yeah.
Of us
actually
who have
scratch
lots
that
of
out
hats.
and
Yeah,
we
for a lot of
say
teachers.
any year teacher.
Yeah, but for folks, there's just illusion. We'll talk about it, but that's
Yeah.
a period of picking up as a mentor. But using that like sort of general frame to think about where you're going to provide your support, right? You can't provide everything up front, and you can't provide everything at the end. So your choices are like, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do later? So I think that we'll get into that piece. Could we share some though? In the interest of time, just some big ones that like stand out to you that you say are like huge takeaways that you want to share. Yeah, Ashley.
Listener and questioner.
So listener, which I'm terrible at, questioner, but this is good relationships building, right? When you're in there, just listening. Sometimes, again, I use my wife a lot. Hopefully she won't see this video. But sometimes she's just like, can you just listen? I'm like, but I got lots of solutions. I'm gonna tell you exactly how to do it.
I don't want
I'll
you to
solve your
solve
problem.
the
Like I don't need to hear the rest of your situation, but I'll solve it. She's like, can you just listen, right? And then when I listen, I start to hear other things. Then I try to solve it, right? But asking questions and listening, I think, is really important. Like, what am I hearing about you? And then also, let me, like we say to students, we want to prompt them to get more information. I think it's really important. Yeah. Teresa.
being a non-evaluator,
Yeah.
and if you have to do the evaluation, being clear with
Yeah.
that it's about growth over time, not about
Yeah. We were. How many of you are in a role also where you're doing like some sort of job evaluation that could be tied to some sort of professional existence at the school? Is that?
With your mentee.
Yeah, with your mentee.
Yeah.
It should never happen, right? It should never happen, but I can't tell you how many times I've been somewhere where it does, right? It's dangerous because, just very basic, as you guys can imagine, I'm not going to tell you anything I don't do well if you're going to nail me on it, right? I'll joke with this with Ashley, I'm going to dog and pony show you all day long and never share
Really
weaknesses.
good actor.
Yeah, I'll figure that out, right? So that's important. And if you are in some evaluative capacity, the notion is you're not here to evaluate job security, you're here to think about growth, right? But that's a mindset that's got to be integrated continuously, because even if you're not, they're still going to be skeptical when you come to the classroom. What are you looking for? Who are you going to tell?
Yeah, it's a culture thing at a school
Yeah.
because we've got so few staff members.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
My role next year, there's not a lot of choice.
Right.
It's the director and me, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so the lead teacher piece is all about refining a practice.
So norming that, right, and talking about it, but that can be scary for folks, because I say to people all the time, classrooms, it's not perfect. It goes awry lots of times. I like to see it going awry, because that's where all the meat is, right? That's where all the fun conversations are, right? Because when it's perfect, you know that like either they're really good or they bribe their students or something happened. I had this national board, my school I used to work at when I was a teacher, the national board was really big now. It was before it all got cut from state budgets and all those kind of things. In the state of Virginia, it was a nice bonus. And as teachers would do this, they would film their lessons after school with their advanced placement kids and offering pizza to stay. So they reteach the lesson they taught. I'm saying this publicly. I won't say I don't do it anymore. No, but they reteach as a way to like not think about real growth in videotaping the class that they might stumble through. So I think it's important. Yeah, Stephanie.
Constant learner.
So what do you mean by that?
You're constantly reflecting and learning.
So you're a constant learner, right? Always trying to grow. What else?
The desire to be a mentor.
Yeah. So I always say this about we have issues with finding student-teacher mentors, and my number one criteria is really not, experience matters, their quality matters, but the number one is, are you committed to the roles of a mentor? Here are the 5 roles. Are you committed to doing these things? Because some people were like, I just can't email, I don't have time. I'm like, actually, that's not a good fit. Like, you can't do it right. You haven't committed to like numero uno, which is actually a timely, effective communication with our students. That's the other things that you'd share that are really big.
We talked back there about being intuitive,
So what do you mean by that?
just being able to sense, for example, we had a first year teacher this year that was going to tell like she's having a really hard time.
Yeah.
She looks like she's going to quit.
Yes.
Just be able to kind of sense like when your teachers really need you, and
Yeah.
at the same time being able to know like
with?
Yeah, so
Like not giving them too much at once.
right. So this intuitive sense means you got to be around. You got to know what's going on.
In touch.
In touch. So right, I'll put that in touch. I think intuitiveness is like sleeping with a book. You're not going to be able to pass a test with that, right? So the intuitiveness is like your awareness, right? What do they call it? Doug Lamar used to call it withedness, right? This thing that you can like have, eyes in the back. It's not eyes. I tell teachers, it's not eyes in the back of your head, because that suggests that you need additional things to be with it. It's the notion of you're aware of your surroundings, you understand what's happening, right? So that's definitely important, yeah, Ashley.
An advocate for them, what they need, when they need it, and how to get them what they need.
Advocate, right? They're not going to be as forthcoming as I would be in a school. When I go to the principal, I look, this is a problem. We don't have enough textbooks. But a new teacher's like, I don't want to lose my job. I'm not going to go to the principal and tell him he misordered or she misordered, right? So yeah, but that's a simple example of resources, but I think that's really important. Yeah. Anything else that just is burning a really important characteristic? Yeah.
Kind of touching a bit resourceful.
Resourceful.
You know where to go to get what you need.
Yep. So anybody write resourceful? I think I did not spell that right. Resourceful. Setting expectations. Does anybody have that?
We said reasonable and realistic, like kind of odd outline.
Yeah, so reasonable, realistic, and here's the catcher, actually setting expectations, right, for that relationship. So it means, hey, we're going to meet once a month. Or this is how it's going to work with if I have questions. So actually setting expectations, that's the number one thing I encounter in my job between a mentor and a mentee when it doesn't work. And usually it boils down to, did you guys actually talk about how you were going to communicate, how you were going to support each other? Did you guys actually have those conversations? Do you like to text each other? Do you like email? Did you actually, they're like, no, we don't. And then to find out the student teacher's texting a teacher who has like a phone from like 1989, right? Doesn't even have a text plan, right? You know, these things of lack of actually, so it's not only reasonable ones, but actually, do you actually set expectations that first week, maybe that fourth week, maybe in the summer? Again, your context is going to determine that piece a little bit. Yeah, just something. Yeah. And we'll move on.
Almost like that was maybe the first thing that mentors and mentees do this year was like the setting expectations conversation. But everyone felt like it was really awkward because it's not like a natural thing for two adults to sit down and do it who don't really know each other.
Yeah.
So I can't think of a way to make it a more natural conversation, but still make sure that they're doing it,
right,
so that those expectations are there.
So one way is facilitating it. Right. The notion is like, hey, you guys go to another room and talk about what you expect from each other. You go in there and you're like, hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. Where do you live? Right. I mean, that doesn't, right. You kind of as a coach, you put that on them to do. So I'm facilitating it, right. So I suggest facilitating that conversation similar to maybe we're kind of playing at it today, right. So hey, what do you guys define?
Like almost getting cohorts together.
Exactly. But maybe you pair up with 3 charter schools that are somewhat in your area, right? Again, sustainability. So if you're in a network, right? If you're in a KIPP network out, are you bringing them all together, right? KIPP Denver, or Strive Prep, for example, really has that multiple. So you're bringing them together. So I think facilitation is really important to do because they're going to need help thinking about this because they're going to look at you and go, I don't know, I've never mentored before.
A little sheet where they had questions.
Yeah.
And they were like, when do you like to talk?
Yeah. No, but it is, but you're facilitating, so you get, to be able to do that work. I'm imagining you seem personable, you can do that. Yeah, it's really important. So let's, we're gonna keep these, you can add things up there as we go through the day to we're gonna switch it up and take, I'm gonna do this and we're gonna take a quick break and I'm gonna reformat some stuff. So working definition though of mentoring, right? I think this is important to think about. And I highlighted, again, 3 words that I think are really important to think about. It's about whenever an experienced teacher supports, challenges, and guides, right? And I think all the things you're talking about up here, the things you list as defining characteristics, they all fit into this notion as you're supporting them. What do they need? You're challenging them to say, hey, look, why are you doing this? What decision underlies your decision of your practice today? Look at this data. What changes can we make? Just as examples, and you're guiding them, right? Because the same. I always tell. I do this with my daughter and my wife. That she's not a teacher. I'm a teacher. You can imagine how those philosophies clash in a household. But I'm always like, I don't want to answer it for my daughter. I don't want to give her the answer. I want her to think through those questions, right? I want to prompt her a little bit and guide her So again, when you tell people what to do, sometimes one, they don't respond well, and two, they might not really understand it because they just said what you told them to say, right? You want to prompt them just as we do with our students. So thinking about this as a context for today, supporting, challenging, and guiding, right? But this is something I would introduce to that group that I bring together and say, look, this is your role. And I say to the mentee all the time, student teachers too, I say, look, your responsibility is to hold this mentor accountable and say, look, I need support. I need you to think critically about what I'm doing, and I need you to give me the tools I need to move me forward, right? Because there is a responsibility in the mentee is they can't sit there and twiddle their thumbs as well. They should hold you accountable and say, hey, Stephanie, you're not really being a very good mentor, right? I need more help. And Stephanie's like, what are you talking about? Well, let's talk about this. Let's sit back down and look at our characteristics. Let's sit back down and look at the ways in which you can support me. And you're 10 of 11 of these, you don't even do. Like you do the modeling thing, but everything else you don't do for me, right? So that's that conversation. So how about we break for 10 minutes? So 10:25, then we'll come back. Does that work? It's kind of hot in here, but it's like 10 degrees cooler in the hallway. So let's break, and then I'm gonna circle back around. And if you have questions or concerns or anything, just stick them up here. It's a good time to sort of do it at a break time. I think I like it.
Yeah.
10 minutes, yeah, 10:25. So just keep us moving forward. So one thing,
You're gonna have to do the teacher.
I sometimes never want to do the preaching, but I have a colleague who does it all the time. Like, how do you do that with adults? Like, I would hate that, but so it's okay. Small group is a bigger group. Maybe I would do some innovative. Yeah, right. Eyes on me. Right. I used to have a student stand in my chair. That always seemed to work. So one thing that came up, that Sarah and I were briefly talking about, the best bet for implementing the sustainable piece is doing a pairs training. Right? If you're facilitating, like a new program that Tina might be leading, or Sarah's leading, or even your school, is the actual bringing the pairs together to work together, right? And actually facilitating that. It's great to have a mentor in the room, it's great to have a mentee in the room, but when you can get a room full of 5 mentors in your K-12 sort of spectrum and 5 mentees and having them actually work together, using these tools to facilitate, that's your best bet. Suddenly you're helping control, you're using common language, expectations are being set, but really the most important thing is these two people are getting to work together, away from school maybe, or in school, before school, at a time where the focus is solely on that. It's not like meet third period and do this work, right? It's actually separate from the school time. So that's really something. I put that up. So how do you do that pair support training? Like I said, it's great to have the mentors. I mean, some of you are going to be doing that work. It's great to just do it with mentees, but the best bang for the buck is when you have your partner with you and someone's facilitating and can help support that conversation. So I like to give you guys some high-level things that you can do. Like you think about these 11 ways you apply. Then I also like to give you specific strategies. So I'll give you both ends of the spectrum. So as thinking about high-level look-fors, you think about who could be a good mentor. As you see this list, think about where you're at. Think about what you're like, I'm good with that, check, check, check. But as you're picking mentors in your school, criteria for mentors is really important. So one question I'd ask is you take back to your administrators or your teams and say, what are our criteria? Do we have any? So you'll get this. This is not actually in your packet, but you'll get this. You have access to this. Is thinking about demonstrated proficiency as a teacher, right? I'm assuming all of you are in that role as you start teachers. But again, when you're picking others for mentors, Jackie said she has somebody who's not a good mentor. The question is, what do they lack? What support would they need to be a better mentor, or maybe they're just not a good fit? Knowledge of curriculum instruction, right? They understand teaching and learning. If you're going to model, if you're going to talk about practical, if you're going to do these things we talked about as far as what makes someone effective, curriculum instruction is important. Content and how to teach content. That's pretty important. Or how to teach, preschool kids, or how to teach kindergartners. What is relevant, human emotional development. Right? You have to have knowledge of those things. Sounds funny that you say that, but I worked with plenty of people who really didn't understand world history, but somehow they were teaching world history. I could never figure it out. Interact with professionals in a courteous manner. So what kind of disposition do these folks have in the school? Because they have to be trusted. They have to be respected, right? So that's something to look at. Well, this person's really knowledgeable. Kind of big ego. People don't really like coming to them. And you know what? They're very closed-minded. You might not be the best mentor, right? Or you have conversation with them to bring them, in Sarah's role or Tina's role, to have to bring them to be more effective by saying, hey, look, you need to improve in this area. Got to be on board. Got to be on board, right? It's like being a mentor. I got to be committed to it. It's huge. You'd think that would be logical, but sometimes that's sort of skipped over, right? They know what effective performance looks like. We're going to do some of this afternoon. Do you know what it looks like to see and observe effective teaching? Like, they need to know what that looks like, and to be able to talk about that, and to be able to make a distinction of what's effective and what's not. And we're going to use specific indicators, and you might, we're going to do it two different ways because of the mix we have in here. But what does good teaching look like, right? What does best practice look like? And then they're self-reflective. You guys have said this. So I think all the things that you thought would make an effective mentor as I walked around, they're all listed on this list, right? But that's a good conversation to have. How do you pick mentors in your school? How were you picked? I always like to say that sometimes we're voluntold. Right? That's a term I've known well, right? We've been told. But sometimes that can be really problematic, particularly if you're thinking about teaching as you're gatekeeping, bringing someone into the profession and suddenly you're the mentor and you hold none of these things because you're teaching outside the content area, you hate your colleagues, you think the program's stupid and the principal needs to be fired, right? I mean, these are all things I've experienced in my life as a teacher, right? Yeah.
I think to add though, not just the goals of the mentor, but also concur with the goals of the school. Since we're all at Jersey, we all have a little bit of a different direction.
Yep.
And we have some traditional teachers that come in that don't want to embrace our style of teaching.
It's
Or
true.
they don't get the population.
No, they don't get
Because our
those are
population
important.
is
So I can add concurring with the goals of the school and the mentoring program. Yeah. And so sometimes it's easier for people to kind of, okay, I'll buy that at school, but I'm not doing this. I'm not having Teresa come in my room. Absolutely not. You're like, well, remember the job description? We talked about you being in the growth mindset and talking about reflective dispositions. That's part of having someone watch you teach.
So how do you find this? Do you interview them? Have you guys interviewed them beforehand? Because we only had a couple people.
It's a great question. So how do you pick mentors, right? How do you do this? How do you do this conversation? Is this a survey? I always, in the school I was in, we put out a survey for interested folks about mentoring. Why do you want to be a mentor? What skills do you have that make you a good mentor? What experiences have you had with it? What do you believe are the essential components of a mentoring program? So it's a conversation back to the culture piece that came up immediately. It's like when this becomes a norm, but I would argue besides this one, everything else should, mentoring program or not, those are good things for teachers to have. Like they're demonstrate proficiency, they know what they're teaching about and they understand learning. They're professional and courteous, right? They know what good teaching is because they're having PLCs and they understand what a good effective assessment is, right? And they're self-reflective. They want to improve. Those are all kind of good teaching things that you can vet through. This is the only one that's kind of specific maybe to a mentoring program. So I think you can have an idea about people's dispositions in the school, but I think asking people about who's interested in being a mentor and trying to start that conversation is important to do. I don't know that.
I don't know. I wanted something efficient.
Or you can just say, look,
list
you
that
can
I
just
should
you can
do?
sit there and look at the teachers and go, you know what, Jackie, she's all of these. I just know her. She's been in school for 3 years. I know. I mean, because a lot of these, like, let's be honest, we're not going to talk about them, but let's think about our teachers in our school and our colleges. Like, can you make a pretty good assessment on some of these?
Like, we have a master teacher
Yeah.
who was amazing. She could never be a mentor. She was like half of the things.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got the knowledge of curriculum instruction. She's, but she thinks mentoring is a hoop to jump through. The whole induction idea. So she's very hard to approach.
So you two as a team decided it's going to necessarily be a survey? Because I felt like my survey, they just said what they
we
thought
just
we
do
wanted
it
to hear.
with the principal and
Yeah.
us, and just based on almost personality in a sense. Like,
So-
what you said, just
And sometimes you can take a yearly evaluation of a teacher and look at all this stuff, right? Because most of the stuff is just people you want to have in your building anyway, But it's true. The best teachers don't always. I say this all the time. The best teachers don't always make the best mentors. I use Michael Jordan as an example because I grew up in Charlotte, and he became, people argue, the greatest basketball player ever. He became a general manager of the Hornets in 10 years. terrible. The Charlotte Hornets have been awful for a while, and it was because he was an awful general manager, right? So sometimes the best players don't make the best coaches or general managers. Sometimes they do, but our assumption always is great teacher, great mentor. Not always the case. You're someone who struggles and has gotten better at their practice. Sometimes I find they make much better mentors because they're willing to roll their sleeves up and admit their mistakes, and then demonstrate over time that the good thing about good students, right? Sometimes I love having C students that work hard versus an A student who takes things for granted and thinks they know everything, right? And they do really well, but they always think there's no room for improvement. So,
And then they fail in like crumbles.
yeah, so I think you got to kind of decide on those. But for you as a person, good to self-reflect a little bit and say, where am I at? Because you've been chosen to be here and do this work. So let's take a look. So I always like frameworks, right? Particularly as if you're facilitating stuff or if you're doing it. So there's a really nice book that has sort of guided my work for a long time called High Performance Mentor, right? And what's helpful for me is I'm a framework person. I'm like a domain person. It helps me compartmentalize my thinking, helps me plan, helps me think about what's happening to categorize them. So I've always felt like this is really helpful for me. 6 domains, right, about high performance mentors. So committing to the roles, we talked about that. Accepting the beginning teacher is developing. Wow. You have people who say, well, they should be doing this. I'm like, no, they shouldn't. They shouldn't be doing that, right? Reflective disposition serves as an instructional coach, right? Where models a commitment to professional growth. And this one, the only person that hit it, that's why I said it first, have joy for profession, communicating hope and optimism for the future. So what I want you to do is, two things are going to happen. We're going to kind of pair some things. Is there anything here that doesn't make sense I should ask first? Or you're unfamiliar with? Of what it might look like or be? Anything? Just to clarify terms or anything. Okay. So you have that, go back to that where you listed your characteristics, right? And one, add anything that might have popped up, right? Always adding to this list of things that popped up. But go through and say, where do those characteristics fit in this high performance mentor framework? Like, where do they fit, right? Because we're all over the place with what we believe is an effective mentor. Where do they fall? They might be in multiple domains, right? You can use 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5 because you have that slotted. And then you take it one more step again, back to practice. What would this look like in practice? What would you do, right? These are your 5 or 6 specific strategies about effective mentoring. Where do they fit in this framework? And then what would you do, right? Because these are kind of your babies to start with. These are things you're going to take back to school and say, look, I'm going to focus on these. And then so to do that, we're going to take about 10 minutes to do that. Work together, though, right? Because you came up with kind of a similar, you worked together to make the original list. Add any that you want to add to the characteristics, characterize them in the domains, and then what do they actually look like in practice? What would you do in the fall or the spring?
So I think that the listener in a freshman year would fall into that too.
Yeah.
Accepting the beginning teacher as a professional person and developing person and professional. Because if you're listening to them and you're questioning them, then you're asking them to reflect on what they already know, and then you go from there.
Yep.
I feel like the reflector goes into number 3 because it reflects on interpersonal communication and decisions. The advocate communicates with optimism.
Yeah.
But does it also, well, I guess does an advocate model? Or does an advocate commit to the role? I don't know where that
Both,
would
right?
It could be both.
I mean, both, right?
Okay.
I mean, I certainly know if you think about it, we can't like, empower somebody, but we can show them, give them tools to
Right.
empower themselves, right?
Right.
So how do I request resources? How do I, communicate that I like how something's happening in school, right? It's a model, that could be a model because I do it all the time, right?
So that's like a 5X.
So,
Okay.
maybe that's
So basically roles and responsibilities of mentors, that's where when to give advice and when to let them pick it out. That's part of the roles and responsibilities. Okay. But I feel like that also kind of goes with an instructional coach too. It could be one and
that you might be evaluating on.
What do you think?
I think the thing with these frameworks, is there's lots of overlap.
Right.
And
Which
so-
I'm good with. I just want to make sure that I hit them all, and if I don't, I need to figure out what I missed. Because that's the math teacher. You know, everything has to loop together in a nice Venn diagram, and if it doesn't, then where's the distance?
Where is missing?
My kids hate me because it has to be a puzzle, and making them do puzzles, and some of them hate puzzles. I'm like, if you hate puzzles, then math is not going to be anything for you.
But I also feel that's
So 1, 2, 3, 4, I would say.
Yeah, and so the resource base and one, because you have to have that best.
Right.
The growth mindset is number 5.
Because it models and personal and
I see his learning, I see using the
non-evaluator, I said was slow because that's an instructional coach. And if you are coaching them with instruction, then you're not evaluating what they're doing, but you are giving them feedback as to what they are currently and where they can go. But I feel like that non-evaluator also communicates both tasks.
Agreed.
And you got more.
Well, then, so learner is still there. Because that's the reflection piece, because there's still
So wouldn't that, well, reflection then also a commitment to professional growth, because you are constantly learning as well. I said that's 4.
yeah.
Because that's the instructional coach piece where you are, you know.
What did you say that when you wanted to give advice in this sport?
Yeah, 1 and 4. Yeah, just that we cited. I love that. I love that. I need to be
We were gonna do something with it, but
I need more wall space. I can't reach my walls.
Oh, I stand on this.
I have you walk in and I have this wonderful cabinet, and it's like the length of the wall, except that it's too wide, and everything else is too high. I have to be like on it in order to do anything with the boards that are there.
five more minutes, but really think about what they look like in practice. Take it to that
Because
level.
I can't hang them in
That's where we really want to be, that next step, yeah. When you get, we're working, it's okay. Just want to start, again, we're starting the
See, and
process.
I do that too. We'll start it on the report, and then I'll capture it or whatever, or I'll write it on my whiteboard and I'll take a picture of it with my phone. And then when I have a day off, then I make them.
In a perfect world, I could just kind of make it really big, large paper, and just print it that way. See, I can't want to do it because I will come back.
Yeah, you can email it.
Real quick, if I could grab your attention, just to clarify, so we might not get through every single one of these and every single piece, but we're trying to walk through a process, as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, that you can utilize, but really try to, if you don't get through all of the categorizing, really try to get to a couple where you can walk through, your characteristic, where in the domain it fits, and what that actually looks like in practice. Again, because we could do this, to be honest, for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's, again, modeling a way to do it, and then you can take this and do it in a pair, you can do it as facilitating a training, you can do it with your administrators, I mean, it works really well, because it's funny, everybody will have different perspectives about it. Right?
Do you have the templates available?
Yeah, you should, it should be online, you can download, right?
Yep.
And yeah, you can download all that stuff so you can use it. Yeah, perfect. So take a few more minutes just to walk through and get to, walk it through the whole way to like, what does that look like in practice? Because ultimately, that's where we want to be at, is practice and implementation.
Are you saying we're working in this one?
But you've been doing it, I think.
We're still
Yeah.
What do
documenting.
these practices look like? Okay,
So this is all about conversation.
Sorry.
When you're sitting with someone.
No, you guys are.
What is the thing that you most need?
Oh, that's where the numbers are.
But I feel like you really have to have an intuitive way to navigate. So yeah, intuitive versus and then being intuitive into sensing issues. So the conversations, you have to know where those openings are to ask those questions.
And that's where that reflector piece comes in, because you reflect on the conversations.
So conversations that are three. And then the reflector is
Knowing that you have it.
knowing. Questions to ask.
Yeah.